Hello everyone, my name is Sarthak. I'm a third year law student at the National Law School of India, University, Bangalore, and I'm legal faculty at Clark Tutor. Today, we are going to start with a session on the Constitution. The class for this session was taken on the 30th of July 2021, and this is more of a refresher on what we discussed in class. In this session, we are going to cover four important topics. The first will be just a general introduction to the Constitution, general trivia that you could expect questions from. Then we'll discuss the Constituent Assembly, the members of the Constituent Assembly, the people who are very important in that, and some important dates that you might need to remember because these are questions that CLAC does ask. We'll discuss the sources of the Constitution and different parts thereof, and we'll discuss the preamble. So let's just begin right away. We'll begin with the general introduction to the Constitution. Now, the Constitution is, as you would know, the supreme law of the land. This is the foundational document on which the entire state is founded. It gives you the rules that the state must follow. Now, you might feel that the Constitution gives you rules that everyone has to follow, but these are more importantly rules that the state has to follow. And if the state doesn't follow, you can go to court and hold the state accountable for. These are things, these are rules that tell the state that these are things you can do, these are things you can't do. This is how the government will be created. This is how the courts will be created. This is how the parliament will run. This is how fundamental rights will happen. So all of these important aspects of all of our existences related to the state, all of that is contained in the Constitution. Now, individual acts, let's say the IPC defines that I can't murder people, I can't commit crimes. There are other acts that say I can't use drugs. There are other acts that say I can't violate someone's copyright. But these acts all find their legitimacy and their force in the Constitution of India. These acts are valid and I have to follow these acts because the Constitution has empowered the government to make these laws, to enforce these laws. And if the Constitution has not done so, if the government does not have constitutional force behind itself, then the government cannot enforce these laws. So you'll see how every law in this country that is applicable to you, it traces its legitimacy, its force into the Constitution. Now, the Constitution has several units. You may have heard of the parts of the Constitution or the articles of the Constitution. Most importantly, anything that the Constitution says, anything that it declares is contained in an article. Several of these articles that are thematically related, all of them constitute a part of the Constitution, and any data or any lists, any sort of information that the Constitution has in addition to its declarations, those are contained in the schedules. So let's say that I have Article 1, which says India is a union of states. India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. Now it is a declaration that there is such a state, there is such a country that is known as India. Another name for India is Bharat, and that this India/Bharat is a union of states. This declaration is what gives existence to the state to begin with. So this declaration is Article 1 of the Constitution. Now, any data that is associated with this declaration, which is what exactly is the territorial limit of India, what exactly are the functional units of India, what are the states and union territories in India, from where to where do these states go. All of this data is contained in the first schedule. And that is how you see that the schedules contain like a lot of data that is related to these declarations. And similarly, the first part of the Constitution, which is the first four articles, these give you exactly what it is that constitutes the country, exactly what it is that the Constitution seeks to achieve. And all of these articles that are similarly have a similar theme constitute one part of the Constitution. Another part, for example, would be part 3 of the Constitution, which contains all the articles, all the declarations of the Constitution that say that there are certain rights that people have that the government cannot infringe on. Such declarations, such articles, all of which have the same sort of undercurrent that the government cannot infringe on them, those constitute the fundamental rights. Therefore, all of them are clubbed together under part 3 of the Constitution. At the date of its adoption, the day that it was enacted, as in the 26th of November 1949, there were 395 articles in the Constitution. There were 22 parts within which these were divided, and there were 8 schedules that are affixed to the Constitution which contained additional data. As of today, however, there are over 400 articles in the Constitution. Several times you will see unique additions to the articles, such as after Article 21, there's Article 21A that talks about the right to education. Similarly, there are several articles that have been removed and several new articles that have been added. All of these additions and removals have meant that the number of articles in the Constitution changes very frequently. Similarly, the number of parts of the constitution have also changed. There are at present 25 parts to the constitution and 12 schedules. So you need to remember that there are two different sets of data that you need to remember. As of the 26th of November 1949, 395 articles, 22 parts, 8 schedules. However, as of today, over 400 articles, 25 parts and 12 schedules. This is general trivia that CLAT may ask you. And while we are at that date, the reason that 26th of November 1949 is known as the date of the adoption and enactment of the Constitution is because that is the date that the Constitution was finally written down. And who exactly did this writing down? For that, we'll go back to the Constituent Assembly that was responsible for framing the Constitution, for drafting the Constitution. The idea of a Constituent Assembly was part of the Indian ethos for a long time. It was first proposed by M.N. Roy in 1934. However, the Constituent Assembly only first met in 1946. As of 9 December 1946, there were 389 members of the Constituent Assembly. However, after partition, several of these members left. So finally, you need to remember that there were 299 members in the Constituent Assembly of India. Of these 299 members, you need to know that 229 were from legislative assemblies. These are legislative assemblies that were established by the British, and people were elected to these legislative assemblies, and from there, people were nominated to the Constituent Assembly. So 229 such members were part of the Constituent Assembly, and then there were 70 members who were selected by princely states. There were several states in India that were not under British control, that remained under the control of Indian princes. And these princes nominated from among their people, such people who can represent their interests. When the constitution was being made, these princes also had the opportunity to have representation in the assembly, so that whatever constitution comes out of that assembly would be something that they could also reasonably adopt by themselves. Therefore, there were 70 members that were nominated from these various princely states who were part of the Constituent Assembly. As of the leadership of the assembly, you need to remember that the interim president was Dr. Sachidanand Sinha. You may be aware that Dr. Rajendra Prasad was the president. However, the interim president, before the president was finally elected, there was a certain point of time, there was a certain period of time during which they had to nominate a person as the president of the assembly before formal elections could be held. So Dr. Sachidanand Sinha was the oldest member at the Constituent Assembly and was therefore the interim president of the assembly. Rajendra Prasad was subsequently elected to be the president from among the members. His vice president was Mr. H.C. Mukherjee. And what you also need to know, as by way of important trivia, like there were several committees within which the Constituent Assembly functioned. There were committees on princely states, committees on rights, committees on power, committees on parliamentary processes. However, the most important of these committees is the committee that is doing the bulk of the work, which is drafting the constitution. And this drafting committee was headed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, as you are aware, is known as the architect of the constitution, modern Manu. And all of these names that are attributed to him is because he is instrumental to drafting the constitution and he is heading the drafting committee. Another person who is very important in this process is the advisor to the Constituent Assembly, which is Mr. Benegal Narsingh Rao or B.N. Rao. This is a question that CLAT is very fond of. It has asked this question several times, and you are advised to remember that the Constituent Assembly, the advisor to the Constituent Assembly was Mr. B.N. Rao. Some throwaway questions that you might also like to remember would be that the calligraphy for all of the text of the article was of the Constitution was done by Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada, and the artist who made the beautiful ornate designs on the frame of the Constitution, on like the margins of the Constitution, would be Mr. Nandalal Bose, who is a very famous Indian artist. So these people all contributed towards the Constitution, and these people were part of 299 total members of the Constituent Assembly who gave shape to the Constitution. What is also quite important would be the dates at which the Constituent Assembly got together and decided the course of the Constitution. The first meeting of this Constituent Assembly, as I already mentioned, was on the 9th of December 1946. After that, one of the most important dates that you need to remember is the 13th of December 1946, because as of that date, Jawaharlal Nehru had proposed to the Assembly an objective resolution. The objective resolution was meant to say that these are the objectives towards which we are hoping to make our constitution. These are the objectives that we wish to achieve by making this constitution. And today, all of the Assembly members, we resolve to achieve these objectives. So the objective resolution is sort of the mandate that the committee has undertaken unto itself to say that this is how we are going to make a constitution. These are the ideals that we'll emulate in the constitution. So it was tabled before the Constituent Assembly on the 13th of December 1946, and it was adopted by the Constituent Assembly on the 22nd of January 1947. These are important dates. What is also important to note is that the objective resolution that was adopted by the Constituent Assembly is what eventually became the preamble to the Constitution. Nehru was very influenced by the US Constitution in making this objective resolution, which is why a lot of our preamble is similar in language to the US Constitution. The most notable aspect of it is that we, the people, give to ourselves these constitution, not any other superior power, not any other nation, not any other entity. We, the people, give to ourselves this constitution. This is an idea that was taken from the US Constitution, and it is reflected in our preamble. We'll discuss the preamble later on. What is also important to note here is that the Constituent Assembly had been functioning since 1946, but as we are all aware, the Constituent was finally commenced and enforced in 1950, more specifically the 26th of January 1950. So we know that the Constituent Assembly existed prior to independence and functioned for long after independence. So the Constituent Assembly was also functioning as an interim government for some time. They were also sitting as a legislative house. And in that capacity, they had adopted the national flag of India. The flag that was unfurled on the 15th of August 1947 was adopted by the Constituent Assembly sitting as an interim government. And that flag was adopted on the 22nd of July 1947. Of course, you have to adopt the flag before independence because you are unfurling it as of that date. So the national flag was adopted on the 22nd of July 1947. Another important event that happened in 1947 is that the drafting committee held its first session. The first time that the drafting committee came together and started drafting the constitution. They tabled drafts, they tabled amendments, they sought to see whether or not some amendments could be made to the draft or not. So the constitution started taking shape from the 29th of August 1947. And the last session of the drafting committee, most importantly, was on the 26th of November 1949. Though we may be aware that the constitution was commenced and enforced on the 26th of January 1950, what you need to note is that 2 months prior to that, on the 26th of November 1949, the constitution was entirely drafted. And that day is known as the Law Day of India. So this is an important tidbit that you would like to know. This is also mentioned in the preamble, which we'll again discuss later. Another important date that you need to know is when the Constituent Assembly signed its assent onto the Constitution. That the Constitution was prepared by all of these people who came together and gave their insights and gave their thoughts into the Constitution. That is certified by the fact that all of them came together and signed the Constitution. This signature was obtained on the 24th of January 1950. Now, it is to be noted that of the 299 members of the Constituent Assembly, only 284 of them signed. There were several of them who had shifted to different parts of the country. There were several who had deceased during the time of the functioning of the Constituent Assembly. So there were 15 members whose assents were not obtained on the Constitution, but 284 members of the Constituent Assembly signed the Constitution on the 24th of January 1950. Now, those are all the dates that are important. Another tidbit about dates that is important is how long did it take for the Constituent Assembly to draft the Constitution. Now, starting from the 29th of August 1947 to the 26th of November 1949, they spent 2 years, 11 months and 17 days working on the Constitution. However, they did work on the 18th day. There are two reasons why the 18th day is not considered. First of all, the 17th day is what was considered the last day of the last session, the 11th session of the drafting committee. So as of the 17th day, the job was officially done, and it was not sunrise yet on the 18th day. So somehow, weirdly, they did not consider that the 18th day had begun, and they only concluded that 2 years, 11 months and 70 days is how long it took. This is the official figure that appears in the Lok Sabha website as well. And in case they give you two options asking you how long did it take to make the constitution. If they give you two options, one of which is 2 years, 11 months and 17 days, the other is 18 days, you go with the 17 days and not the 18th. Though like logically 18th could quite possibly be the right answer as well. Go with 2 years, 11 months and 17 days. You can leave any and all feedback in the comments, and thank you so much. Do give your feedback in the comment section. In case you have any doubts, mail us at hello@clacktutor. See ya.